Western Native Voice, we welcome you. We also want to highlight the individuals and the groups that have agreed to be here and participated with us to make this event possible. So of course the candidates that are here in front of you, we want to thank them for their time and their commitment for being here. Special thank you to Montana State University Billings for helping us with their staff and their crew to get this beautiful stage ready. Special thank you to the Montana State University Billings Native American Achievement Center, who graciously supplied us with the tribal flags that you see on stage. It's important for our organization, and to tell you a little bit about our organization. Western Native Voice is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that does work in civic engagement, education, leadership development, and public policy advocacy. And so we believe it's important for everyone to have information, the right kind of information, and information possible to be able to make an informed decision when they cast their ballots this year. And so in that spirit, want to introduce our moderator for today's debate. We have with us Jackie Coffin. She is an anchor and reporter for KTVQ in Billings. She brings to Q2, 10 years of television journalism experience and has been recognized with various accolades, including 2 Emmy nominations and the 2020 Montana Broadcaster Association's Program of the Year. Jackie has reported on Montana's elections throughout the last decade and is especially known for her coverage of the 2018 Montana Senate race, where she conducted an exclusive interview with then President Donald Trump and pushed him for action on the missing and murdered Indigenous people crisis. Jackie is originally from Missoula and went to the University of Montana Journalism School. And to move us forward, I hand it over to Jackie.
Thank you, Tahin, and to the Western Native Voice for inviting me to be here this evening, and thank you to our candidates. There are 4 candidates for Congressional District 2 on the ballot. All were invited to participate in this debate, and thank you both for accepting and joining us this evening. All of the questions asked are from Western Native Voice and its members. The order was randomly generated, and candidates did not receive these questions in advance. Now, the rules of the debate. Each candidate will get 2 minutes to give an opening and closing statement. Candidates will be asked a specific question and will have 90 seconds to respond. Any candidate specifically named can have up to 45 seconds to respond. Candidates are all allowed to use notes. And we give a reminder to candidates and the audience about decorum. Please hold your applause to the very end of the debate. And we ask our candidates to please focus on the issues. So then, if another candidate is speaking, we ask you to simply raise your hand instead of trying to speak over the other candidate. So with that, we'll get started. The order of questions and who begins was randomly generated. And the first opening statement will go to Penny Ronning.
Thank you. Oh.
Test 1, 2. Thank you. Thank you to Western Native Voice. Thank you to all who are participating here tonight and all who came and all who are viewing on Community 7. I acknowledge that Billings was built upon the unceded homelands and villages and traditional use areas of the Crow, Northern Cheyenne, Sioux, and Blackfeet people, and that this land is part of the Elk River watershed. I acknowledge with deep sorrow the violence and genocide that was done to Indigenous peoples throughout the lands and the ongoing historical trauma and current trauma that is yet to be fully and properly addressed. I recognize and give honor to the elders and generations of Native Americans that came before us and acknowledge the important contributions of Indigenous peoples, the region's rich Native American history, and contemporary cultural influences that contribute to our beautifully diverse community and country. I look forward tonight to all of the subjects that are at hand. Thank you.
Jackie, good to see you again. And Tahin, if you're back there, nice to meet you tonight. Penny and I have accepted every debate that we've been asked to do. That would be about 9 of them, I think, in the beginning. Our opponents don't show up. Matt Rosendale did show up for 2 and out. The other night I had a gathering with Mark Roscoe and Dorothy Bradley. And I looked at Governor Roscoe and I said, how many times did you debate? And he said, 33. And then Dorothy said, no, Mark, they're still debating. We had 35 debates. And I really compliment Western Native Voice for having a debate. There are too few debates, and we're delighted that you have one. I'm going to save some of my remarks for why I'm doing this to my closing remarks. But I've met with Native American leaders, and I think I get a lot of what they're interested in. I've been critical of the last legislature, even though Penny and I are running for U.S. Congress. And I'm very critical of what happened in terms of that legislative session, attacks on health professionals, librarians, school folks, and I think on electoral rights. And I was very, very delighted that Western Native Voice was a plaintiff in the lawsuit on the constitutionality of the election laws that I think really needed to be overturned. I look forward to the questions, and thanks again for having me.
All right, the first question will go to Penny Ronning. Almost half of our members say they believe access to health care is inadequate in Native American communities. If elected, how would you address these disparities?
Thank you. And I just want to verify that, is that our clock up there?
And you have time
Oh,
cues
okay, there we go, down
too.
there. Okay, sorry about that. We weren't given,
That's
we
okay.
weren't given that instruction, so sorry about that.
Apologies.
Thank you. Access to health care. That has been an issue that we have learned about in this journey of 22,000 miles around Congressional District 2. What we see within our tribal reservations and within the tribal nations in particular, even throughout the country, not just in Montana, but really even throughout the country, is we see that lack of health care. This is a critical concern, not only for the lack of health care, but what we need to upgrade in Indian health services as well, and better funding for Indian health services. So some of the things that we do need to address are telehealth, especially for those areas in rural communities and rural counties. We can better have access with training for physicians and medical professionals, nurses, mental health care professionals, substance abuse. We need better training within our medical schools to provide training on dealing with rural areas and issues in more rural areas. So I think those are some of the things that we can address at the federal level, and it needs to become a priority.
Same question, I presume.
Yes, I can read it again.
Could you? Yeah.
Almost half of our members say they believe access to health care is inadequate in Native communities. If elected, how would you address these disparities?
Well, I think there's federal issues. I think Penny's mentioned a couple. The expansion of telehealth in our state is really remarkable. I served on both hospital boards locally, and that was not even a part of their services. So I think it's critical. Rural health care in general, I think, is probably more of a problem even for Native Americans. I was just in a county where Baker is, and they do not have one single full-time staff person. They're using traveling nurses, traveling physician's assistants, traveling doctors, and I think the same problem exists on the reservations. I do think that when it comes to student loans, et cetera, that I think that serving on reservations should continue to be a way to pay back your student loans. I think health in general for the state, but particularly for reservations, is a critical problem.
All right, the second question will go to Gary Buchanan. Do you have creative but practical solutions to the opioid crisis that is disproportionately affecting Native Americans and their families?
Well, I think a lot of it is what law enforcement talks about, and both Penny and I have supported our local law enforcement. And I think wherever these drugs are coming from, whether it's the border or whether it's China, as some folks say, that it has to be more professionally prosecuted. And I think overdoses lead to suicides. I've been very active in suicide walks and suicide prevention programs statewide. But I think I think drugs are a critical problem for our criminal justice system and for the health of Native Americans.
All right, Penny, I can repeat the question. Do you have creative but practical solutions to the opioid crisis that is disproportionately affecting Native Americans and their families?
Thank you. When we talk about anything related to substance abuse, one of the systemic issues we absolutely have to talk about is poverty. On too many of our tribal reservations and within our tribal nations, poverty is it's prevalent. And that's one of the systemic issues that we absolutely have to address. Poverty leads to mental health, leads to crime, leads to issues that end up affecting the entirety of the community. So I think economic development on our reservations is something we absolutely have to address. We have to address ways to build collateral, ways to develop banking systems on our reservations. I think these are things that will have a ripple effect into addressing the systemic issues that lead to the opioid crisis. Then we also have to address the crime issue that's related to the opioid crisis and the meth crisis and what we're seeing now within fentanyl. But those are things that we can do at the federal level, but I do believe the greatest issue that we have to address is poverty.
All right, the next question is for Gary Buchanan. Have you ever experienced the Native American way of life in Native American communities or had the chance to professionally meet with members of tribal leadership? How will this experience or lack thereof help shape your policy ideas?
Well, I have. My wife and I were invited to the Crow Festival this last year by a family, and it was a large family. We learned a lot. The family was very dependent on working in the coal mines there. And then when I set up and ran the Commerce Department, I had and this is a long time ago, but I had a coordinator for Indian Affairs. And we probably call it a coordinator for Native American Affairs. And it was a specific position within the Commerce Department that we set up to work with tribes on economic development. And I think that moving forward, in my close I have a couple thoughts on that, but moving forward I think that my relationships are not deep enough. There's a lot of things I don't know. In my business, saying I don't know, I've instructed my staff that works for me that if you don't know, say it. So there's a lot of things I don't know, but I'm eager to learn and have a fair amount of experience.
All right, Penny Ronning, have you experienced the Native American way of life in Native American communities or had the chance to professionally meet with members of tribal leadership? How will this experience or lack thereof help shape your policy ideas?
Thank you. As many people know, since we've been doing these debates and in the work I do in human trafficking, my mom was a career federal employee. The bulk of her career was with the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Finance and Reconciliation. So my childhood memories are with my mom going to the different tribal nations that she worked with and that she was hired to work with. So I've had a childhood of where I was taken care of by many of my mom's coworkers. Also in the work that I do on human trafficking, I've been very honored to do training sessions with many of the tribal nations here in Montana and throughout our country. I'm very proud of the fact that we just recently did the very first tribal court training on human trafficking on the Fort Peck Reservation, and that's the very first tribal court training in the entire nation. Just recently met with Northern Cheyenne. I've met with Rocky Boy, with Fort Peck, with Fort Belknap, and look forward to meeting with the Tribal Council of Crow. But I've been meeting with all of the different tribal nations and look forward to that again. And I'm very grateful for my experience and my life experience with all of the different tribal nations.
All right, the next question is for Penny Ronning. Do you support a nationwide Indigenous Peoples Day in lieu of Columbus Day?
Yes. Would you like for me to explain further?
if you'd like.
Yes, and have worked at that at the state level, have worked at that at the local level. I do think that it is beyond time and shameful that our country still recognizes Christopher Columbus as a hero. I think that that absolutely needs to be changed. So I am for not only recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day as a national holiday, but I also think that we need to eliminate Christopher Columbus as a holiday. And I don't think it's appropriate for our country to be acknowledging him as a hero.
I'll make it short so you can ask more questions. Yes.
All right. The next question for Penny Ronning is a member-submitted question from Western Native Voice. What are some things that Native people, especially young people, can do to break down the barriers to voting and have their voices be heard and get involved?
I love this question. You are the future of this country. Your voice is probably the most important voice to be heard. Because when it comes to government, whether it's tribal government, whether it's your local municipal government, county government, state, or federal, the decisions that are made at that government level are often made for years into the future. So the effects of those laws that are put into place take time to come to fruition, and so they're really for more into the future. There are definitely laws and policies that get put into place that are for the here and now, but it's the young voice that really needs to be heard because the decisions that are made in government really are for your future. So what can you do? You can start by learning how policy is made. That's really critical to understand, is how policy even comes to be. And start making your voice heard at the local levels, whether you are participating or want to participate in your tribal government. Go make your voice heard at those meetings. Send emails to your elected officials. Do that to the municipal level as well, the county level, the state level, the federal level. Call up your elected officials and say you'd like to have a meeting, you'd like to learn, or you'd like to express your thoughts. Those are some of the biggest things that you can do, and just become engaged. But I encourage you to take this moment right now as an invitation to do that, and then move forward and make your voice heard.
I think part of the problem is that Native Americans register to vote at very high numbers, and then the turnout is oftentimes an issue. One of the things I've been reading about Western Native Voice, their Get Out the Vote effort, and I think I would support any effort to make elections more free, more fair, and more open. Not only getting out the vote, but I think what Western Native Voice did and other groups in terms of the last legislature's restrictions, I think that advocacy is extremely important, and all of us need to thank the Native Voice group for challenging those elections and looks like so far winning in their efforts.
All right, the next question is for Gary Buchanan. Over 60% of the missing people in Montana are Indigenous. What solutions would you propose to help bring more of these people home safe and reduce the risk of more gone missing?
I talked to a former congressional candidate today who was Native American, and his concerns are community security in general for Native American communities. And I think a considerable amount needs to be from the state, local, and tribal level to reinforce law enforcement on the reservations. We saw how difficult some of these cases have been. By the way, I applaud Penny for her work on trafficking. I'm very impressed with it and admire her for it. But I think criminal justice system needs a lot more help in the Native communities. I think I've been in downtown Billings for 43 years as a business person, and we have troubles with young people from the reservation. And I think I would like to see what I mean by that is drinking and drug problems like the rest of us. But I think there needs to be better cooperation between our own police and sheriff departments and the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the police on the reservation.
All right, Penny, over 60% of the missing people in Montana are Indigenous. What solutions would you propose to help bring more of these people home safe and reduce the risk of more gone missing?
So, government works in boxes and boundaries. If there's not a box, that data doesn't get collected. That box doesn't get checked. That information doesn't get written down. If it's not written in the boundaries of that job, it's often not done. So much of what we need to do is we need to get boxes on law enforcement forms that actually say Native American, Alaska Native. We need to be able to collect that data at better numbers. We need better training within law enforcement. We absolutely need to address racism. We need to understand the role poverty plays. We need to understand the role, the lack of communication between law enforcement jurisdictions, and we need to learn how to communicate beyond those jurisdictions and communicate with one another. One of the most important things that we learned through our task force is that we also need to have a shared language. So you need to have victim service providers as well as law enforcement that have a shared language. So when someone writes something down on a form, the next time that that form or the next time that that victim or that trafficker or that predator or whomever it might be comes up on some type of a database, they can go in and look at the form and they understand what was done the last time that that person was tracked. So there are different things that can be done, but these are some of the biggest things that we need to do is communication, communication, communication. And we need to be able to have those jurisdictions broken down in those strict boundaries and have that communication that takes place throughout those jurisdictions.
This question for Gary Buchanan. There are growing concerns among the Native American community that law enforcement are not treating these types of MMIP cases the same way as they would non-minorities. How can you change this narrative?
Well, I think there's two levels. One is making sure that there's opportunities in federal law to improve it. I believe what you say in terms of the discrimination differences. And so I think it has to be a work at federal, state, and local levels. I think that law enforcement needs to work together. And I think when I chaired the crime control board for the state, we had the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration was active, and we had programs for Native American communities. So I think there's room, quite a bit of room at the federal level to assist in that stark difference you just mentioned.
All right, Penny. There are growing concerns among the Native American community that law enforcement are not treating these types of MMIP cases the same way as they would non-minorities. How can you change this narrative?
First of all, they're absolutely right. So part of what I said before, that's the same answer with that. In 2017, the Urban Indian Health Institute out of Seattle, Washington, did a study nationwide. What they learned is that Montana's 5th in the nation with missing and murdered Indigenous women cases. And sadly, Billings was 5 amongst the 72 cities throughout our country. So we were number 5 in the nation among those 72 cities with missing and murdered Indigenous women cases. It goes back to, is data being collected? Is our documents being followed up on? Are reports being followed up on? These are critical, but these are critical into the training of law enforcement as well. I'm really proud of the work that I've done in regard to training in law enforcement, in regard to raising funds for law enforcement to go after human traffickers. But one of the things that we also need to do is we need to make sure that we're also working at hiring more Native American individuals to serve in law enforcement. This is also critical. We need cultural training within our law enforcement jurisdictions and all of the different levels of law enforcement, and we need that training across the board. We need to keep bringing these law enforcement individuals together at all different levels, federal, state, county, local. They all need to be training together and culturally training together. So I'm really proud of the work that I did on City Council here in Billings to create a Citizens Police Advisory Board that actually works specifically on this issue as well. So those are some of the things that I agree with that question, and those are some of the ways that we need to address it.
This question for Gary Buchanan, submitted by a Western Native Voice member. If elected, what is your plan to help alleviate the rising costs of high electricity prices for rural communities?
I was in a debate last night. I opposed electrical deregulation. Actually fought Governor Roscoe on the subject, and he's now a supporter. We bury our hatchets and move forward. But I think we have a real problem in the state. We've had now the third bankruptcy, Talon Energy. We started off with Montana Power. We had Northwestern go bankrupt. I testified 20 years ago that they were going to go bankrupt. Now we have Talon, which is the major operator in Colstrip. So we've been like babes in the woods, I think, in terms of how we negotiate and move forward with electrical companies. I'm very impressed with renewables. Portland General yesterday, I think it was, announced a major investment in the solar power outside of Colstrip. I met recently with the Calumet refinery in Great Falls, and they've put about $100 million into a renewable part of their refinery, which will produce renewable-based diesel fuel. So we have a long ways to go on electrical providing for all Montanans.
All right, Penny Ronning, if elected, what is your plan to help alleviate the rising costs of high electricity prices for rural communities?
So once again, I'm really proud of the work that was done on Billings City Council. One of the initiatives that I brought forward was to develop an energy conservation board. I'm so proud of the work that that board has done. Billings has now been recognized as LEED Gold. What that means is that we are one of 120 cities that is leading the nation in energy conservation. Billings has become a model of what we can do throughout the country and in Montana on how we can start reducing our energy consumption and lower those energy bills. But I agree with Gary. I think that there's so many opportunities in Montana to bring in renewables. That doesn't mean that we shut down coal and oil and gas. We're not ready to do that, and those jobs have been critical for our state. But we have this great opportunity in our state to actually develop more wind, develop more solar. Recently in Colstrip, there was a meeting on nuclear energy, and I'll just share, we do these debates quite a bit. Gary shared how many we've done, and I know that he just misspoke, and he's going to know right when I say it, but it was the windmill energy that Portland brought in, so not solar, it was wind, and it's easy to misspeak, so not a correction on you, but it was not a correction on you. It's so easy to do that. Absolutely. So, yeah, there are plenty of opportunities, and especially within the ag industry, so many members of our agriculture industry have the opportunity to use their land as a solar farm or a wind farm, and this allows them more opportunity to increase their commerce within that area as well and increase their revenue for their land. So there's great opportunities here, and I hope that Montana will take advantage of the federal money that's come in through the Infrastructure Investment Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. There's a lot of money that can be used right here in Montana, so I hope our state does that.
I'll write this next question for Penny Ronning. Do you believe that Montana's elections are safe and secure, yes or no?
Yes.
Gary Buchanan, do you believe that Montana's...
I agree. I kind of get it. I think Joe Biden was legitimately elected president, and I think the Republicans in this last sweep were legitimately elected. But I have never run into whining winners like this last group, and I think our election system is quite safe and quite sound.
I'll write this next question for Penny Ronning. If elected, what actions would you take to increase access to voting services for Native Americans?
I think one of the things that was recently done is good, and we need to just continue to increase that. And and that is that a tribal ID is acceptable, and a voter that has a tribal ID cannot be denied if the ID doesn't have a residence address on it or if it has been expired. I think that that's a good thing, but we need to do more. I do believe in mail-in ballots. I think that those provide greater opportunity to participate in our democracy. What we've seen with mail-in ballots is that people exercise their right to vote at a greater number. So I think that that needs to be done. I think that there are ways within our tribal nations that we can deliver ballots and collect ballots in better ways. I think that there's greater access to education that we need to be able to help younger folks learn how to vote, the importance of voting, and not be intimidated to vote, but to understand what that right within our democracy is. So I think those are some of the things, but definitely access to actually getting that ballot and getting that ballot turned in.
I think we need more respect from the next legislature. The overturning of the three bills so far on election process are important. You can register to vote on Election Day, according to our own district court here, yet the Secretary of State is behind the ball, finally getting out the fact that you can register on Election Day. I think the voting ID thing in general was attacked by this last legislature, and I think hopefully again, the district court's ruling will stand up. Voters for Native Americans, particularly in Indian country, have to travel long distances. I think all of these bills of the last legislature started to really hurt that process. So I'm, whether I win or not, will be pressing the next legislature to be more realistic and more open for voter access in general.
All right, the final question for Gary Buchanan. If elected, what steps will you take to continue preserving the Native culture?
I think working closely with the Native American agencies. I'm very impressed with Secretary Holland and her appointment, and it would be a delight for me as a freshman independent to work with her. I think that was a very important signal, not only to Native Americans, but voters in general. So I would work with everything I could at the federal level to provide more access to voting, and I would continue to put as much pressure as I can by debates like this to put the pressure on our own state government.
All right, Penny. If elected, what steps will you take to continue preserving the Native culture?
I think one of the most critical things is we have to preserve Native language. And there has to be the ability for our Native American nations to preserve their language, to help others understand the importance of preserving their language, and that's our responsibility as well. One of the things that I've been so impressed with is Island Mountain Development Group in Fort Belknap and Native American Development Corporation right here in Billings. The things that these folks are doing is profound within our state, and I think also serves as a model for the entire country of the work that they're doing to produce commerce on the reservations, to lift others out of poverty, to grow economy, but they're also working to make sure that folks that have young children have the opportunity to go to a workplace and their child is being cared for and nurtured with folks that are talking to their children in Native American language. And they've just surrounded the wholeness of that environment with the culture of that nation. And I think that these are things that we can really support, as well as educate our urban areas and our rural areas, the amazing value of our First Nations, and make sure that we understand that we have to work together on this, that it's not the responsibility of tribal nations to bear the burden of preserving their culture. We have to work with that as well. We have to help that move along.
All right, we're moving into our final statements. Remember, you get 2 minutes for these, and we'll start with Gary Buchanan.
I ran filed as an independent for 3 different reasons. One, I think people were ready for an independent candidate, tired of both parties, the way they treat each other. And I say Penny accepted on that because I've never seen her do what bothers me at the national level. I think that running as an independent is an important statement in the current political dialogue. I filed when Matt Rosendale refused to commend the Capitol Police. That I'm very in touch with law enforcement. That's angered sheriffs and police chiefs from across the state. And then I filed when Rosendale was one of 3, 426-3 to vote against Ukraine. And since then, he's voted against NATO and even Sweden and Finland. 10% of the voting population, little under 10, are Native Americans in this state. That's a very important component of the electorate. What I would pledge to do is something I did a long time ago. I would actually hire on staff, I think that kind of representation in the state's important, hire on staff a Native American coordinator to help educate me in terms of what to do. So I would do the same thing I did 40 years ago and hire a Native American to advise me on what I could best do in the U.S. Congress.
And closing statement for Penny Ronning.
Thank you. Thank you again, Western Native Voice. Thank you again, Jennifer. Thank you again to all who showed. And this is our last debate together, so Gary, thank you. And I think both of us will recognize and acknowledge that the incumbent representative has rarely shown up, and we hope that you recognize that as well. We've both shown up to interview for this job, and we hope that the voters recognize that also. But I guess the biggest statement I want to make is that in the wholeness of our federal government, we have so much work to do to repair broken treaties, to repair broken promises. And that starts with us. That starts with the 2 of us on this stage. And I shared this with the board members of Island Mountain Development Group in Fort Belknap. I can't promise you that I can fix everything, but I can promise you that I will work my hardest to do so. I've put 22,000 miles on my car. I believe in campaign finance reform. I've paid for my own travel expenses. I don't get paid to campaign. I'm campaigning for you. My childhood memories are right here in Montana. You are the people I serve. I ask for you to vote in recognition of your best interests. Who will best represent the needs that you have? Who has best represented you outside of campaigning? Who has seen your needs and has worked with you? That's the biggest thing that I want to share, and want to thank you for your incredible resilience and your patience with those that have so badly hurt you and the history of trauma. You have been unbelievably gracious to all of the rest of us in this country, and you deserve better than what you have gotten. And my promise to you is I will work my hardest to repair that and to give you what you deserve on this land that is yours. Thank you.
And thank you both for joining us again. You buzzed through those questions tonight, and we respect your dialogue on these topics and your respect to each other as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's give them another round of applause. Big thank you to the candidates. Like Jackie said, really plowed through those questions. So thank you to the audience here for taking the time to be here with us in community. A reminder for everyone to make sure that you have a plan to vote, make sure that you're vote ready and that you have a plan, whether that's by mail ballot or in person on election day. Please, please, please make a plan to vote, and those in your life as well to make that plan to vote. And so, and if there's any any assistance that anyone needs, and people who are watching out there and want to get in touch with our organization, you can call 406-869-1938 or email us at info@westernativevoice.org. We'd be happy to provide assistance, rides, and other assistance that you may need. If you have any questions on where to vote, how to vote, we'll be happy to provide that assistance. And so thank you to Community 7 for broadcasting this on their platform as well as ours, and have a good night, everyone.